Hello friends, and welcome to Sushi Making 101 with Roll This Way. My name is John. I am the chef and owner here at Roll This Way. I want to say thank you so much for joining us today while we learn how to make some sushi. But before we do, let me tell you a little bit about us. In 2011, a small group of friends wanted to have a dinner party. We didn't know what we were gonna make. Luckily, one of them knew how to make sushi. Asked everybody if they wanted to learn how to do it. We, of course, all said yes. And then one thing led to another. Everybody wanted to make their own roll. And by the end of the night, we thought this would be a great idea to go to people's homes or offices and teach them how to make sushi. This quickly grew into a full-on catering business. From dinners for two, to weddings in the hundreds, to huge corporate events in the thousands, we have now come full circle, and we're super excited to bring you Sushi Making 101 with Roll This Way. I would imagine that for most of you, this is your first time doing this, but don't you worry, you're in good hands, and it's a lot easier than you think. So before we get started, there's a few things we're gonna need. First thing, a damp washcloth. We're gonna need a little bit of saran wrap, a bowl with water in it, and then maybe a platter or a plate so we can put our rolls onto it once we're done rolling. Next, we're gonna talk about what's in your kit. First things first, our food box. We're gonna talk about the details of this as we go along with the lesson. We have our trusty rolling mat. This thing's gonna get wrapped in saran, and we will get into that a little bit later. We have our reusable chopsticks, our little but super sharp knife, so please be careful with that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what sushi actually is. Contrary to popular belief, sushi is actually anything that has to do with vinegared rice. So as long as you have a little bit of rice and you season that with vinegar, that is technically sushi. It doesn't have to be raw fish as most people think. It could be any kind of meat, it could be vegetables. Anything to do with vinegared rice is technically sushi. All right, so in this class, we're gonna go over 4 of the main types of sushi. We're gonna cover nigiri, which is the little ball of rice with fish on top. Classic Maki roll with the nori on the outside. We're gonna tackle an Uramaki roll, which is the inside out roll, and we're gonna make a Temaki roll, or a hand roll, or a cone. All right, so we're almost ready to start the lesson, but before we do, we're gonna wrap our rolling mat. All right, guys, so the purpose of wrapping our rolling mats is quite simply to keep them clean. When the rice gets in between these little bamboo sticks, super hard to get it out, so it makes our lives a lot easier if we just wrap this thing in plastic. So all we gotta do is pull out a nice big sheet of saran. We're gonna wrap this once, making sure not to leave a crack here so that everything is nicely sealed inside. You wanna force a lot of that air out. And then we fold it on both sides. And then I like to wrap it twice. And then we flip it the other direction, like so. Again, flattening it out. Making sure everything is nicely sealed. Get that air out. Okay, and the last step, we're just gonna cut a little hole. Give it a squeeze, get that air out. There she is. All right, so for the first lesson, we're gonna be doing a classic avocado cucumber maki roll. Maki coming from the term Makimono, which actually means rolled thing. So for this one, we're gonna go into our food box and we're gonna need an avocado and the thicker stick of cucumber. First thing we do, we're grabbing our nori out of the pack. These nori sheets come in full sizes like so. But before we get started, we're gonna need to cut these down to size. Okay, so we're gonna be cutting these into 2 different sizes.
For this first roll, we're gonna be cutting off 1/3. So all we gotta do is grab a knife and measure out 1/3.
Give it a little cut, and you can either discard this other half or give it to your dog. I'm gonna be using this guy for the first roll, but just because we're gonna need the other ones as well, we're gonna take a couple more sheets and we're gonna cut these guys in half, like so. So now we have 2 small ones and 1 large one. So for that first roll, we are grabbing our larger sheet of nori. One thing about nori, very important, is you will notice that these things are double-sided. One is very rough looking and jagged. The other one is super shiny and nice and smooth. Important to remember that every time we are working with nori, the rice always goes on the rough side. An easy way to remember that is rice on rough. So we're gonna need our rolling mat, and the rolling mat is also double-sided. One side is nice and smooth and flat, the other is kind of rigid. So we're always using the flat side up to roll. So we're grabbing our rolling mat, placing it right in the middle of our cutting board. I'm assuming you guys have all washed your hands. And if you have not, go ahead and do that now. I'm gonna go and throw my trusty gloves on. I like to use these while I make sushi because it keeps the rice from sticking into my hands, which I'm not a big fan of. So here we go. We're grabbing our large sheet of nori, as I said, the rough side up, and the nori is going down onto our rolling mat, which is positioned horizontally. The bamboo sticks are going from left to right, not up and down. Obviously, we won't be able to roll it that way. So, large sheet of nori goes down on the rolling mat with about 1 centimeter of bamboo showing at the bottom. And before we work with rice, every time we work with rice, we get our hands nice and wet. That's what that bowl of water is for. We're gonna make sure that we get that water in between our fingers. This stuff gets very sticky. And we are grabbing a ball of rice, about the size of a baseball. We wanna make sure to keep this thing nice and fluffy and airy. We don't wanna squish it. If we squish it, we're not gonna be able to spread this thing out over the nori, which is basically what we wanna do. So once we have our ball of rice, about the size of a tennis ball, we're placing it right down in the middle of our nori. What we're trying to accomplish here is to cover this entire piece of nori except for one little strip exposed at the top, about a centimeter wide, just like this bottom edge over here. So again, making sure that those hands are nice and wet. What we want to do now is dig our fingers in right in the middle of that ball and spread that rice out to the sides. So after we've spread this out, we don't want to push the rice down into the nori. We actually just want to gently move it around, pull it towards ourselves. The reason we do that is because if we were to push it straight down into the nori, the rice would stick to the nori and you wouldn't be able to move it around. So what we want to do is gently push the rice around, away from ourselves and then down towards ourselves. And then if you have any little gaps left over, feel free to grab a little bit more rice and fill them in. That's what we're looking for. So now that we have our rice spread out over our sheet of nori, we are grabbing our thicker stick of cucumber, placing it right down in the middle of our rice. We are grabbing our avocado. If you've never opened up an avocado before, quickly, we just take the tip off like so, discard that, and then we take our knife, cut right into the middle, and what we want to do is just spin that avocado around the blade and feel that pit inside. And then we take it and we just spin it open like so. You can put the one with the pit on aside for now, and then we grab our knife using the back end of the knife, not the sharp side. We are scooping out 2 nice thick slices of avocado and placing them right down in the middle of the nori, right next to the cucumber. Okay. We can wipe our knife on our trusty little kitchen towel here. And then we are ready to roll this thing. All right, so it is time to roll. We want to make sure that we have that exposed piece of bamboo at the bottom. And before we roll, we put our thumbs underneath the rolling mat. Very important, not just under the nori, under the rolling mat. We are using our leftover 8 fingers. If you still have all 8, we are using these guys to keep everything tucked inside. What we want to accomplish here, we want to make sure that this bottom edge of the rolling mat does not go over the top of the nori edge. You want to make sure that it closes in somewhere within this area here. So we are going to go ahead and roll this over itself. And like I said, making sure that this bottom edge of the bamboo does not go over the top. Make sure that we get to this point here, guys. And make sure that we got all this rice and nori left over to be able to seal the roll in. So I'm just going to open this up for you so you can see that now if we're going to roll this over itself, all this rice and nori left over is going to give us a nice tight seal. So here we go. Just roll this thing over itself, making sure that that seam is right at the bottom in the middle. And we're giving it a nice little squeeze. And there she is. Beautiful classic Makimono with the seam right at the bottom in the middle. So a common question I get a lot is what is sushi grade fish and what is sushi rice? Sushi grade fish, quite simply, is the freshness. You can buy sushi grade fish at a local grocery store. Just go to your fishmonger and tell them that you want to make sushi that night, and you let them know that you need the freshest piece of fish they have. All that stuff that's in that display case, that's the good stuff. If they have the stuff at the bottom that's wrapped in saran already, that means that that stuff has already been living in the display case for a couple days. You want to stay away from that. You want to get the freshest fish they have in the display. All right, and then what is sushi rice? Quite simply, it's just short grain white rice that's been seasoned with rice vinegar. That rice vinegar has also been seasoned with sugar and salt. Totally depends on how sweet, salty, or sour you like your sushi rice. And that's gonna be depending on you, and you can control that when you are making your own sushi rice. All right, so for the next lesson, we are doing a temaki, or a hand roll, or a cone, some people call it. So for a regular menu, we are gonna be pulling out our spicy tuna ramekin. And for anybody that's doing our vegan menu, you're gonna be pulling out our vegan spicy salmon. It's gonna have a little VSS on it. Everybody else, we're pulling out the ST ramekin. All right, guys, so spicy tuna temaki. We have our small sheet of nori, rough side up. First things first, anytime we use rice, we are getting our hands nice and wet. And we're grabbing a ball of rice, much smaller than the first one. We're looking for something about the size of a ping pong ball. We're looking about something this big, and we're keeping it nice and fluffy and airy, just like last time. Ball of rice goes in the top left corner, furthest away from us. So this is the bottom edge closest to me. We are looking for the top left corner further away from you. Now what we want to do, just like before, we don't want to push straight down into the rice. We just kind of want to pull gently on it towards ourselves, creating a beautiful little V shape like this. Okay. And we are grabbing our spicy tuna ramekin, just putting it right on top of that. Now what we want to do is cover that rice with the spicy tuna, making sure that we bring it down all the way, covering every little bit of rice. This way we ensure that we have a little bit of tuna in every bite, all the way down to the bottom. And now all we gotta do is pick this thing up, placing it in our left palm. Keep going. Okay. And now we have it in our left palm. With our left thumb, we can take this bottom little edge over here and just close it up like that onto the tuna. And quite simply, we are literally just rolling this over onto itself to the right, creating a perfect little cone, just like that. All right, guys, so hopefully that temaki went well for you. What I like to do with my hand rolls is eat them right away and make sure that that nori is nice and crispy. And while you do that, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the origins of sushi. All right, so a little bit of a controversial topic is the origins of sushi. Where did it come from? Where did it start? A lot of scholars believe it actually started in China, not Japan, roughly 200 BC. Back in the day when the rice paddies would get flooded with water, a lot of the fish would come in as well, and that's how the people would catch the fish. And then the way that they would preserve the fish and the rice, they would cover it in salt and vinegar, and then that would keep the fish and the rice preserved, as they didn't have refrigeration back then. So fast forward about 900 years, sushi made its way over to Japan, where they took it on and kind of made it their own. The primary forms of sushi in Japan are something called omakase, which is I put my faith in you, where the sushi chef kind of chooses the menu for you. Primarily what they do there is sashimi and nigiri. Fast forward to about the 1960s is when it made its way over to North America. Dealing with a little bit of a different palate in the West, sushi chefs had to come up with different ideas to please everybody, not just the classic nigiri style that they had in Japan. So they came up with the Makimono. More specifically, the California roll was born. And from there, it's evolved to what we know sushi as today. There's a lot of big flavors and a lot of sauces and a lot of flair. All right, moving on. Next lesson, the Uramaki roll, which literally means inside out. So for this one, we are doing our lobster California roll. And if you have the vegan kit, this will be our tofu California roll. First thing we're gonna need for this one, we are grabbing our lobster ramekin that has a little L on it, care of Daily Seafood, that provides us with all of our amazing seafood. And you will also note that there is no filler in any of our stuff, nothing but pure amazing seafood. So we got our lobster. We are grabbing our small stick of cucumber and the rest of our avocado. And then we are using our smaller sheet of nori for this one. So let's go ahead and grab our rolling mat. All right, guys, so for this one, we are using our small sheet of nori. And as always, using the rough side up, we place our nori down on our rolling mat with, again, another about a centimeter of bamboo exposed at the bottom. And then we all know by now, first things first, whenever handling rice, we got our hands nice and wet. And we are going in for a ball of rice, about the size of a tennis ball, maybe a little bit smaller than the first roll. Keeping it nice and fluffy and airy, we are placing our ball of rice down onto our nori sheet. This time around, we are not leaving a centimeter of nori exposed at the top. We want to cover up this entire sheet of nori. So again, making sure our hands are nice and wet. We're gonna go ahead and poke our fingers right into the middle of that ball, spreading it out into the sides. And remembering not to push straight down into the nori, we are pulling the rice towards ourselves. Nice and gentle, just moving it around on the sheet. Taking our time. Okay, and again, if you have any little gaps, feel free to grab a little bit more rice and fill up those holes. Now, also in your kit, you will find a little ramekin with sesame seeds in it. So if you like sesame seeds, this would be the time to go ahead and toss those on top of our rice. I'm just gonna use my shaker here. And go ahead and put that right on top of the rice. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. And now, like I said at the beginning, this is an uramaki roll, or an inside out roll. So all we gotta do to make that happen is grab the top corners and flip this bad boy over. Okay, now this is the lobster California roll, or for our vegan friends, our tofu California roll. So we're gonna grab our 2 sticks of tofu and we're literally just gonna place them side by side right in the middle. We start with our beautiful East Coast lobster. That's gonna go right down in the middle of our nori. Like so. And then we grab our thin stick of cucumber, placing it at the top or the bottom. It makes no difference, it's up to you guys. And grabbing the remainder of our first half of avocado, we're slicing much thinner slices of avocado this time around. Reason being, we already have all this product inside of the roll. We don't want to put too much stuff in there because then we won't be able to close it up. So 2 pieces of avocado, nice and thin, go right down in the middle of the nori. What we want to make sure that we do here is we don't want to cover up more than about 1/3 of the nori. So we're looking for something like this. Okay, now we're going to be rolling. And now, just like the first roll, first thing we do, we put our thumbs underneath that rolling mat. what we want to achieve here is get this bottom edge of the nori to not go over the top edge. So all we got to do, using our leftover 8 fingers, keeping everything tucked in, we start rolling. And we want to bring this bottom edge of the rolling mat right to this point here. Again, we're making sure that we're not going over that edge. We can tuck everything in with our fingers like that. And then I'm just gonna open that up for you so you can see now that we have all of this leftover nori here that's gonna allow us to seal the deal. So all we got to do now is roll this thing over itself, keeping that seam right in the middle at the bottom, tucking it in, give it a nice squeeze, and we slowly pop her open, revealing our beautiful lobster California Uramaki. Sushi fun fact. If you ever wondered what those weird towels are that hang inside of a sushi restaurant, you gotta walk through sometimes to the doorway, well, fun story. Back in the day when sushi was more of a street food in Japan, a lot of street vendors would hang towels for people to clean their hands with. So if you want to find the best vendor on the street, you find the one with the nastiest towels, the dirtiest towels. So yeah, it definitely has evolved over the times, but that's what those little towels are inside of sushi restaurants. Sushi fun fact. Nigiri translates into gripped in hand. So we were literally just grabbing a little ball of rice, forming it into a nice little football shape, putting a little piece of fish on top, and that's what our nigiri is. In our regular kit, you will find the salmon and tuna nigiri, so you could go ahead and pull that out. Totally up to you whether you want to do salmon or tuna for this one. I'm gonna do one of each. And then for our vegan friends, we are doing the red pepper nigiri. First things first, we always get our hands nice and wet whenever handling rice. And for this one, I'm only getting my left hand, as I like to make my nigiri with my left hand. So, nice and wet, not too wet. You wanna make sure that the rice sticks together, so you don't wanna get it too wet. It's always about that sweet spot. We're grabbing a ball of rice about the size of a ping pong ball. Looking at something about this big. Again, keeping it nice and fluffy. We are kneading it between our knuckles, trying not to squeeze it too hard. We're looking for something about the shape of a football, something like this, nice little cylinder. And if you like wasabi, this is the time to go ahead and just dab a little bit of it and put it right on top there. And for this one, we are doing the tuna nigiri. So I'm gonna grab my beautiful slice of ahi tuna, placing it right on top of that ball. And again, cupping it with our hands like this, creating a nice little basket. We're grabbing our index and middle finger of our other hand, and we're basically creating a little cocoon, closing it inside like this, giving it a nice squeeze, but not too hard so we don't misshape that ball of rice. Open it up, twist it around, and another little squeeze. Pop it open, flip it over upside down, and another little squeeze. And at this point, our tuna is stuck to our ball of rice, looking all beautiful, like so. And boom, there's your beautiful tuna nigiri. All right, so I'm gonna go over a quick vegan version of the nigiri, and we're gonna do it with avocado this time. So first things first, we're gonna get our hand nice and wet. We're grabbing a ball of rice, again, about the size of a, I don't know, ping pong ball, maybe a little bit smaller. Trying to keep this thing as fluffy as possible. We're gonna be kneading it in between our fingers, forming it into a little bit of a football shape, like so. I'm gonna put this down and grab our avocado. The blunt side of our knife, very carefully, we are slicing out a nice sliver of avo. And grabbing our ball of rice, putting it right into that little basket there in between our first knuckles. We place the avocado right on top. And just like with the fish, we are cupping it in between our knuckles, grabbing our other hand, 2 fingers on top, creating a little cocoon. And we give it a nice little squeeze, not too hard. We don't want to squish this avocado. Spin it around and do it again. And we just flip it over. One more squish, and we pop it open into a beautiful avocado nigiri. You might have noticed there's a little bit of extra product left over. For a regular menu, friends, we have the spicy salmon mix. You can use this however you want. You want to make an uramaki or a hand roll, or you just want to eat this with a spoon right out of the container, that's up to you. That's what it's for. And then of course for our vegan friends, we have some pickled beets and some hummus. And with this, we can make an amazing Mediterranean roll. Basically, just take out the pickled beets, lay them down inside of an uramaki roll, a little bit of avocado, spread out some of this beautiful hummus, roll it up, and bang, Mediterranean roll. All right, friends, we are at the last part, which is cutting. But before we get into that, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Japanese sushi knives. It all started when these bladesmiths that used to make the swords for the samurais had no more swords to make because the samurais were a thing of the past. So what they did was they pivoted into making sushi knives. Seeing as sushi became such a popular and big thing in Japan, this was a perfect way for them to pivot and keep their craft alive. And this beautiful example of that would be the Takeda Hamono blue carbon steel, kind of an all-around utility knife that you can pick up over at Tosho Knife Arts in Toronto if you should so please. All right guys, so one last thing before we get into cutting. We're gonna go ahead and step up the difficulty level just a notch here, and we're gonna turn our lobster California roll into a green dragon. So, first thing you're gonna need to do is grab our other half of avocado, and we're gonna pull that pit out. So if you don't know how to do that, we just grab the heel of our knife, and we're just gonna tap it right into that pit and give it a little twist, and it should come right out. Now, if your avocado is nice and ripe, which it always is with Roll This Way, we can go ahead and peel this thing right off. Okay, so we have our half of avocado sitting nicely on our cutting board, and what we want to do here now, guys, is we're going to turn this into an avocado fan. What that means is we're going to take our knife and we're going to stand it up perpendicular like this, and we're going to be making little slits in this avocado as thin as possible. Now, being very careful, again, these guys are very sharp. We're gonna hold our avocado like this, and we're gonna use our knuckles as a guide. So now all we gotta do is using the tip of the knife, make super thin cuts in the avocado. You can go nice and slow, make sure you get it as thin as you can, and we make sure we don't cut ourselves. Okay, you don't actually have to use the whole avocado for this. About 2/3 should do the trick. Okay, now what we're gonna wanna do is fan this thing out so that it's about as wide as a classic Maki roll. So all we gotta do now is just push forward and down on the front and pull back and down on the back until we are left with a beautiful little avocado fan like so. All right, and now we have our avocado fanned out. So what we want to do next is take this whole thing and place it right on top of our roll. So we grab our knife, we can slide it underneath, and we can do it in pieces, like so. Okay, now we have our fan sitting on top of our roll, just like that. And then we grab our trusty rolling mat. We're just gently sliding it right over the top and laying it down, making sure that that avocado fan doesn't fall off on either side. And we give it a good squeeze, adhering that avocado to our lobster California roll. We slowly and carefully peel it open, revealing our beautiful new green dragon inside. All right, there it is, green dragon. Now let's go ahead and cut these bad boys. Okay, here we go. We're cutting our first roll. Let's bring back our avocado cucumber roll. This one is a lot easier to learn how to cut on, seeing as all the rice and everything else is contained inside. So first thing we do, we grab our knife, and remember the water that we used for keeping our hands nice and wet. We can now bring that back, and we're gonna use it for lubing up our knife. So all we gotta do is dip the tip of our knife into the water, and we're gonna tap on the bottom of our handle, making that water drip down the front edge of our knife, lubing it up. And now, what we wanna do is use the sharpness of the knife to our advantage. So we don't really need to put any downward force down into the roll, because we wanna avoid squishing the roll. We want this to look beautiful after we cut it as well. So what we wanna do first is put the tip of the knife right in the middle of our roll. And then we wanna just put our fingers right over the top, and with a constant sawing motion back and forth, we never stop moving our hand until we cut all the way through. So starting at the tip, we hold our roll and we start sawing, never stop. Go all the way through, boom. End up with a gorgeous straight cut. All right, bring it back together. Get a blade nice and wet, and then we're gonna turn these two into four. Again, constantly moving that blade back and forth, never stopping. If we were to stop kind of halfway through and push it straight down, we're gonna squish this thing, and that's the last thing we want, seeing as a big part of sushi is presentation. So now we turn our 4 into 8. And there we go. There's our beautiful avocado cucumber roll, which I like to typically plate it like so. There it is. And next we have our beautiful green dragon. So this one, guys, is getting a little bit more tricky because we have all this stuff on top and the rice is on the outside. So if things start falling off, don't worry. That's bound to happen, happens to me all the time. And I'm gonna show you how to fix everything at the end. So just like with the first roll, we're dipping our knife in the water, tapping the handle, letting that water run down the edge of our knife. And we're going right down in the middle of our roll with the front tip of our knife. We grab our roll and we start sawing back and forth, never stopping. And then we turn the 2 into 4. And then the 4 into 8. You see, sometimes these things fall off. No fear, I will show you how to fix everything at the end. There we go. 8 pieces, good to go. I'm just gonna put this guy right back on top. And seeing as it's all kind of messed up looking, we can go ahead and fix that by grabbing our trusty rolling mat, placing it right over the top, give it a nice little squeeze, and we bring it right back to life. That's pretty much it. There's our green dragon, and the way I like to plate this guy is take them apart and kind of stagger them like this. All right, and if you have any sesame seeds left over, you can also spruce this guy up a little bit, like so. And there we go, you guys. That's how we cut our Maki rolls. All right, friends, and that concludes the lesson of the day. We want to thank you again for joining us, and please encourage you guys to go ahead and put some of your creations up on your socials. It's really going to help us out a lot. Don't forget to tag us at Roll This Way Sushi, and we'll see you in the next lesson.